I'm here with Randy Alcorn. Thank you for joining us here at the ERLC.
Great to be with you.
So you've written quite a bit about the treatment of animals. You had the dog that you've written about and some pets you've written about. I think most Christians might have a category with animals. Maybe you should treat your pet well, but maybe don't have a fully developed idea of why Christians should care about the ethical treatment of animals. So can you kind of enlighten us on why that's important?
Well, if you look historically in Genesis 1 and 2, you have people who are the climax of God's creation. You start with the inanimate, and you work your way up, and then you've got vegetation, and then you've got animals. And animals are living beings, and clearly something big happens when living beings come on the stage. Then the higher living beings, created in God's image, that's us. And so then we're given responsibility, Adam and Eve on behalf of the whole human race, given responsibility to do what? Care for the animals. And the animals then, as the second most important aspect of God's creation, are the first most important thing for us to care for that's under us. I mean, first would be, of course, caring for other people, obviously maintaining our relationship with God and, all of that. But then next would be animals. And so Scripture puts a high value on animals. You have God in the book of Job, for instance, talking about the horse. Behold the horse, and it goes on, verse after verse. Clearly, God is proud of this animal who eats up the ground as he runs, and he's noble, and he's fierce, and he's this, and he's that. And then describes the ostrich, which is a pretty funny-looking bird, and describes all these things. And in Psalm 104, where it talks about Leviathan, who you made to sport or to play in the depths of the waters, and how the waters teem with living beings. And you have these descriptions of the animal world. You also have Proverbs that says the righteous man cares for the life of his beast. He takes good care of the animal entrusted to him. That's what a righteous person does. In terms of ethical treatment of animals, of course, it's always going to be true that somebody will take too far some concept that's good. But we have this problem as Bible-believing Christians sometimes of throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Right. I want to expand on that a little bit, because I think sometimes when Christians hear about ethical treatment of animals, their mind automatically goes to organizations like PETA who really take it too far and seem to. What's the danger of taking it too far? I mean, I'm guessing it's that when people are diminished, right? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's when people are diminished and where too much is made of animals, in the sense that we see in Genesis 9, where animals were first given over to human beings to be able to eat them. Interestingly, not only were they not eating animals in Eden, but between Eden and the flood, it was just green plants that people ate. And then there was this change. And you can get into reasons why that might be. But then you have in Genesis 9 a remarkable account where I'm going to say, I think it's about 5 times, God repeats that he is making a covenant with mankind and all living beings. He includes animals. He is making a sacred covenant not only with people, but repeatedly, he says, and with the animals. And he's making certain promises. And those promises have great implication when you look at the book of Romans, for instance, Romans 8, and you've got the whole creation that groans and suffers. Very clearly, it's human beings suffer, we groan, but then what's the rest of the whole creation that's groaning and suffering? You could say that trees figuratively groan and suffer. And by the way, when in response to your true question, which I'm getting away from, but about the extremes, on this. I mean, I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I know extremes. And when it comes to people chaining themselves to trees because they don't want to kill our cousin the tree. You know, and so and I heard people will say, I heard the groans of the trees being killed and slaughtered and all of that. Well, obviously, we're not. Romans 8 is not talking about that, but it is talking about a creation that groans and suffers besides human beings. What can that be but the animal kingdom? I mean, that's what it is. And then it says, those animals which fell on our coattails, it doesn't use this language, but the animals which fell on our coattails, when we sinned, they were subject to death and suffering. Those will rise with us in our resurrection, because what are they awaiting? They're awaiting the resurrection of the children of God.
Wow.
They're awaiting our redemption, and they will be redeemed along with us. And that's why you see in Isaiah 11 and Isaiah 65 animals on the new earth. And Isaiah 60, which is quoted twice, that passage is quoted twice in Revelation 21 and 22 and applied to the new earth. And that passage is full of mules and camels and other things. It very clearly, on the new earth, there will be an animal kingdom.
Wow. So I want to get specific. So Christians should care about the treatment of animals, say like maybe the food that we eat, that how it was raised. I mean, should that be part of our consciousness? Should we care about, say, like the way that chickens were cared for before they were slaughtered? I mean, how do we press this into the modern? What does that look like?
I think just being alert to the fact that God recognizes the reality of the curse. He does give animals over to be eaten by people, but decency that he would expect of his image bearers who represent him. These are God's animals. So I think there is something to, yes, I am going to slaughter this animal, so you could argue, well, if you're going to slaughter the animal, why should you care how you, treat the animal? But I do think there's reasonable care. Again, can you go overboard? Sure, you could go overboard, but you can go overboard with anything.
We should at least care.
We should care, and I think it's just it is a stewardship. It's a dominion that's given over to us.
Of course, things like cockfighting and all these things, that Christians should be against those things, right?
Absolutely, and dog fighting and all of these things. That just makes no sense. There's no biblical justification. There's biblical justification, I think, for certainly leisure, entertainment, sports, whatever, that you can make a case for those. You cannot make a case for animals tearing each other apart and placing bets on them,
and there's a difference, right, between dominion as God's, image bearers and exploitation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And dominion means care. I mean, it's like when we think of it negatively, because we think of a king has dominion and then he treats his subjects harshly. No, let's think of God as the model of a king of the universe who treats his subjects with love and care. And you can bet that Adam and Eve were treating animals with care. And it was part of the curse, part of sin, human sin, that led us to mistreat animals. And so I think we should recognize it as a sin. It's inappropriate, it should be confessed, and it should be dealt with. Again, do we put the value of animals over people? Are we saying that nobody should eat meat? Are we saying, no, we're not saying that. We're just saying take reasonable care.
I want to ask you, you've written pretty eloquently about losing a dog, a pet. And so I think you've written pretty well biblically just about how the attachment that you can have. And can you talk about that? I mean, what it means to people that, the pets and what they mean to us?
Well, I grew up with dogs, but my wife's first dog she had was a Springer Spaniel that I gave to her that we named Champ, and he lived to age 13, and he died. And it was very, very hard on both of us. And I was with him when they gave him the injection, and I'm stroking his head and all that. And, there are Christians who do the equivalent with animals that they do with concern for the environment, all those tree huggers, and then all of a sudden the term tree hugger is a pejorative that, well, let's just throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
Same thing with animals. And everybody has heard the stories of cats that, somebody left millions of dollars to that could have fed hungry people. Okay, those are the extremes. But who gave us this care for animals? And I said to my wife, sweetheart, this animal has been a gift of God to you. I saw her, she went through a dark time, some depression, where this animal ministered to her, brought cheer into her life. And same thing with our Dalmatian, Moses, who followed Champ the Springer Spaniel, and again, very, very close, also lived to 13 years old, and again, very hard on both of us, but especially on my wife. But then now we have a golden retriever named Maggie, and Maggie Grace, and we love that. We adore that dog. We don't idolize that dog. We don't elevate that dog, inappropriately. But I often will get down on my knees and hug her, and I will often pray to the Lord with my head, on her, and thank God for this gift entrusted to us.
And does care? There's something about care for animals, right? That kind of brings out the sort of stewardship giftings God has given us, right?
Absolutely. Our grandsons come over, and the love that they show for our dogs, and the love they see us show our dogs, and the delight they take in. We're supposed to take delight in God's creation. And the higher the creation is, the more delight we should take. So we should take the most delight in God Himself, who's above all, then second most delight in people, and then what would come next? Animals. And so I often, with my grandsons, will look up funniest looking animals, crazy animal videos. And we will watch those, and I will continuously say, look how creative God was. Can you believe this blobfish? It's ugly, but it's wonderful. And you look at all of these crazy looking things, and the chimpanzees and baboons and the different things they have, those animal friendship things, those weird animal friendships. Those are just delightful. And again, Isaiah 11, Isaiah 65, we're told that the lamb, the lion, and it's actually the wolf, the lamb, the lion that will eat straw like an ox, no longer carnivorous, no longer a predator. They will be released from the curse of suffering and death along with us.
That's a great word. Thank you, Randy Alcorn, for joining us here on ERLC.
My pleasure.